Hello, everyone. I believe many of you have just come into this Water at Wayne seminar from the waiting room. And I want to tell you that it won't be long. We'll get to hear Dr. Giblin very soon. We're going to wait a few more minutes to allow a few more people to enter. But I wanted to just welcome you here and thank you very much for being here. And we will be getting started in another 2 or 3 minutes.
I just want to give a shout out. Hi, Freda. Hi, Carol.
Oh, hey.
I made it on. Thank you.
You got on, Sarah. Great.
Sorry to bug you. I'm
Okay.
excited.
Oh,
Hi,
thank
Freda.
Thank you. Hey. Who's
Oh,
that?
hey, Julie.
It's Julie.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, there's Lori. Yes. OVPR reunion.
Oh my gosh, this is great.
Oh, how cool. All right. Sorry, I just
This is
had to.
wonderful. Okay.
Don't mean to distract you.
See you all, but glad you could come.
So nice to see a lot of friends and colleagues and neighbors in the audience. It will just be about 1 or 2 more minutes and we will go ahead and get started. So I think we will go ahead and get started. And I'd just like to say welcome to everyone. Thank you for coming to this Water at Wayne seminar today. This happens to be our last one of the 2020/2021 academic year. We will be getting started up again in the fall with Water at Wayne, and we will be very active during the summer and get to report all that out to you in September. A few housekeeping things before we get started. All of you are probably quite familiar with this. It's best to keep yourself muted through the presentation. And I believe that we will be ensuring that all the audio is off except for the speaker. And regarding questions, we love questions. We hope you ask questions, and you can make use of the chat box during the presentation. And don't wait till the end. If you have questions about a piece of art that Freda is displaying, feel free to put that question in the chat box, and Freda will answer it, I'm sure. So without further ado, I know that Freda has a lot of material because I had a chance to have a sneak peek in advance at her presentation. And although I got to see it, I didn't understand everything, I can tell you that. So I can't wait to hear what she has to say herself. Freda, and let me just give a brief introduction. I know many of you already know Dr. Giblin, but let me just say that Freda retired from Wayne State University in June 2015, and she joined the Docent training program at the Detroit Institute of Arts that fall. While at Wayne State, she worked in the Division of Research, helping facilitate interdisciplinary research among faculty from all over campus. And that's really how I got to know Freda. She helped me in very many ways. Prior to this, she helped set up the perinatology research branch of the National Institutes of Health and worked in strategic planning at the Detroit Medical Center and the School of Medicine. She holds a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Goucher College and an MA in teaching, MBA, and PhD in social support and mentoring from Wayne State University. I look forward to this presentation, just as I'm sure all of you do, from Freda.
Great. Thank you so much, Carol, for that introduction. And thank you all for coming. I'm very, very happy to be here on behalf of the Detroit Institute of Arts. And I want to thank Minna Schwartz, who's also here today. She is a fellow docent and helped me prepare some of these slides. So to start with, this is going to be called Water and Wayne, Water and Art at the DIA. That's the next slide. And then after this, you'll see a list of some of the artworks I'll be presenting. And let's just get started with the water jar with Heracles and the Erymanthian boar. This jar is from ancient Greece, and it depicts one of Hercules' 12 labors. This is the fourth one, where he was tasked with bringing alive the Erymanthian boar back to Eurystheus, the king. So imagine you are at a banquet in ancient Greece, and you're one of the guests reclining on the couches. You're being entertained by musicians who might be women or other entertainers, and slaves would be serving you food such as ostrich. You're leaning on your left elbow and you're eating and drinking with your right hand. So instead of drinking water, you would probably be drinking a diluted wine. This is the water jar that would be used to dilute the water. The next slide shows you a side view, because the two handles were used to lift the water jar, but you poured the water jar, the hydria, with the handle in back. What would the wine jar look like? That's on the next slide. And the DIA has this Greek wine pitcher. If you were going to store wine in larger quantities, you might use an amphora that was much longer. That might be a clay, that might have a rounded bottom, so you could put it in a rack. But that was the wine pitcher. The next slide shows a crater, which is the mixing vessel. This is where you would pour the water and the wine. And so it's got a wider lip, as you can see. This depicts Zeus, who was the king of all the gods on Mount Olympus, and his sister and wife, Hera. The next slide depicts what you would actually drink out of, a kylix or a drinking cup. And all of these are shown at the DIA. So we welcome you to come and visit. The next slide will show you how a river might be depicted. And of course, in an agrarian culture or society, water would be extremely important. This is a mosaic that was made during the Roman Empire. It was made by the Romans in the city of the ancient city of Antioch. It was in Syria at the time. It's now in Turkey. And the river is depicted as a man with a wreath of river grasses. At the four corners of this mosaic, and this was made of stone, the first tesserae were made in Greece out of stone, and later they came to use cut pieces of tile. On the four corners of this, you'll see the vegetation that grows around the river Tigris. The next slide will show you a map of where this was found. And if you can see the hand pointing there, that would be where the city of Antioch was. Now, the port city that was about 12 miles away from Antioch was, I think, actually where the living room was, where this was found. Now, back in 1932 to 1939, a group of archaeologists from Princeton University dug up this site, and they found this at the place called Seleucia Piera, which was the ancient port of Antioch. And it was found in what's called a triclinium, or the dining room. The next slide will show you a close-up. The people who lived there. Now, Seleucid was one of the generals of Alexander the Great. And he, after Alexander the Great died in 323 BCE, Seleucus became the governor of this area. The letters are in Greek. As you can see in this close-up, there's a lot of shading. So it's a very humanistic representation of this river god. Around the neck and the upper chest, the colors vary a little bit. And so this has colors that are sort of greenish. You've got some purples, you've got some rose colors. It's a beautiful piece. Please come and see it in our Ancient Middle East gallery. The next slide will show you the triclinium or dining room at the Roman villa at Seleucia Pera in then Syria, where this was found. And you can see at the corner, the river Tigris. At the four corners of this dining room floor, there are actually four representations of rivers. The rivers were important, of course, to the agricultural culture, as I mentioned before. And the next map will show you where some of the rivers are located around the Fertile Crescent area. So into the Persian Gulf on the right, between Iran and Saudi Arabia, is where the Tigris and Euphrates exit. And if you go to Turkey on the bottom part of Turkey, just where we were looking at Antioch, around those regions are where the rivers Orontes and Peramos are located. And so those four rivers, Peramos, Orontes, Tigris, and Euphrates are what's represented. And the next two slides will show you the Fertile Crescent areas. Okay, let's see. Let's go to the next slide. And so this was one of the teasers to get you to come. And it has to do with, what does an ancient marble column have to do with water? Well, in the 10th to 12th century, some of the Islamic peoples in Egypt and around the Mediterranean area started repurposing the ancient marble columns to be jar stands. So a jar stand was carved like this because on top of it would be placed a porous terracotta or clay jar. Now, first I'll show you where this was located. Egypt is on the next map of Africa, on the next slide. And so that was sort of the area. But there were other areas that were close by where they also had these kilgas or jar stands. And the next slide shows you where what that porous water jar looks like. And this is from the Bernanke Museum in Athens. And you can see where people would scoop out the water once it's been purified. And the following slide will show you a jar stand, a kilga and marble base from Damascus. And that's a very fancy, fancy kilga or water jar stand. So ancient ways of purifying water for use in the home, for drinking, for cooking, and various other purposes. Let's go to the next slide, and we'll go to China. Now, China between between 960 and 1279 was ruled by what's called the Song Dynasty, S-O-N-G. And let's imagine we're at another banquet, and this time around 1122, and the Emperor Huizong has invited you to a banquet. And you were greeted by 400 female musicians, lots of food, and you have a banquet that is being made for a person by the name of Kai Xiang, who has written about making the perfect cup of tea. Well, the tea culture was really perfected during this particular time. And this bowl was perfect for serving the powdered tea that would be whipped up. And it's called hare's fur. Let's take a look inside inside this and the next slide. And you'll see that there's sort of striations going into the center because the glaze looks like it's an iron oxide kind of a glaze. There are many layers of it, and it looks like rabbit fur. This was a perfect kind of cup for serving tea because with a conical shape, you could hold it in your hand. The thickness of it preserved the heat. The black background would allow you to see the bubbles rising from the whipped tea. And so it was quite popular. The next slide shows you whereabouts tea came from. And if that just west of the island of Taiwan is Fujian, F-U-J-I-N, the county where the tea would have been grown. And so the emperor would have gotten tea fresh from there. He had water brought up from 100 miles away because it was nice spring water. So a lot of effort to cart water for a banquet. Let's come to America, the Southwest, for our next depiction. This is a 4-mile polychrome jar made by the ancient Pueblos. Now, you might know this as the Anasazi Native Americans, but we now call them by the title or the culture they prefer to be called by, and that is ancient Pueblo. So it's a dry area between Arizona and New Mexico where they live. And so, of course, rain is very, very important. The steps that you see leading up in black on the outside of this jar probably refer to rain clouds. The white that you see on that step, on these steps right in front, that's lightning. And so they're depicting a thunderstorm, source of rain, and very important to people in a dry climate. On the neck of this jar, you'll see a bow tie kind of a figure. And these are butterflies that come during the rainy season. And there's a little bit of a squiggle that looks like it's coming into a G with little black dots. It's white with little black dots. And that's it. And that tends to, that we think it might be proto-butterflies or butterflies before they become maybe caterpillars or something. So our next slide brings us to Italy. Now, if you were in an elegant setting at another party, let's say, in Italy, one of the things you might do for entertainment is to look at a picture like this by Giulio Romano. And this would be used in something like a parlor game. And there are two things about this that I'm going to tell you are related to water. But overall, in general, this allegory of immortality sort of tests your knowledge, sort of like Jeopardy, as to what some of these symbols are. So, for example, there is a serpent. Oh, let's start with the top. There's a phoenix right in the center that is arising. And a phoenix lives for about 500 years, then immolates itself, and 3 days later, there's rebirth. And that's probably from the ancient Egyptians. There's a snake eating a tail, and that's the symbol of eternity, just above the hand. There you go. And to the left of that is a symbol for the universe, that globe. Let's go to the figure on the top right, and that is Apollo. He came to be associated with the sun, but it was really Helios, who was known as the sun god, who over the course of the day would ride his chariot as the sun moved across the sky. But at night, he would live in a cup and sail in the oceans of the north. So there's that water reference. If we go to the water below, we can see that looks pretty dark and murky. And it's possible that that could be the river Styx, which the ancient Greeks believed was the river. And Charon would ferry people in his boat to the underworld, Hades. So the people in the boat might represent Charon and somebody who might be newly deceased. The next slide brings us to the Netherlands. There's a lot in here about water because we've just had a thunderstorm. And this painting was done during the Dutch Golden Age. Van Ruysdael was a part of a family of painters. His father and his uncles were all excellent painters, and our DIA gallery in the Dutch galleries shows their paintings. This is what is called a vanitas, V-A-N-I-T-A-S. And a vanitas is a remembrance that life is fleeting, that a lot of man's endeavors and women's endeavors are fleeting because their time is short. Now, the Dutch went through this Dutch Golden Age, and many levels of society became better off. It was not just wealthy, he became wealthier. And that is due in large part to trade by the Dutch East India Company, which went to the Far East, brought back things like tea and spices, porcelains, silks. But the Calvinist church tended to be, to want to not have their parishioners spend lavishly. They wanted to remind everybody that life is short. You need to accomplish good things while you're here. The Jewish cemetery was built after there was an influx of Jewish people who were welcome because they were leaving Spain due to persecution. Spain became a Catholic country under Ferdinand and Isabella. And so when they came to Amsterdam, they needed a place to bury the recently deceased, because in the Jewish religion, you have to bury your deceased very shortly. And the Jewish cemetery shows us many things about water, the clouds in the sky. You see the rushing water right front and center. So water has the power to destroy. The branch, the broken tree trunk above the rushing water shows us that many things just don't survive in nature or man-made. So some of the tombs are starting to come apart. And to the left of that rushing water, you can see a little bit of a tomb that has come down and is going to be falling in the water. But there are, and also you see signs of decay with the tree on the right, the foreground, the old castle in the background, which may be a Crusader type castle. So even though things don't survive, forces of nature cause erosion to occur, there are signs of hope. And some signs of hope include the rainbow on the left. And you see sort of above that and slightly to the right of that and to the left of the castle, a couple of white birds. And to the right of that, you see the sun coming out. So this is a vanitas again, and it tells us about the shortness of life. Our next slide is also from that area. Now, Holland is an area that probably has about 1/5 of the land that has been reclaimed from the sea. It is that low. And the major powerhouse for removing that water and keeping it pumped out was the windmill. And so this is a scene that Ert van der Neer had done. He's known for doing scenes that might show a lot of pastoral kinds of things, but he puts the moon directly behind this, the windmill. We're not really intended to see the moon, but what does the moon illuminate? This colossal, although quotidian somewhat, I mean, it's an everyday sight that you would see, but this windmill has done so much to protect the lives of people by keeping the water out. You do see a lake there, you see some fences, you see, there might even be some people, but the effect of the windmill was to create polders. Polders are boggy areas that technically are alkaline, but by putting dikes, areas of raised land along the seashore, and having sluices through which water could go out during low tide, the land could eventually dry. Those boggy areas could dry. And when they dried, they're called polders, P-O-L-D-E-R-S. So the windmill was an incredible piece of machinery that helped people do that. The windmill, by the way, might have come from, or they were described in ancient Persia in 644 and also about 915. So they might have derived from that ancient kind of windmill, which was horizontal. Let's see, our next slide shows you a sort of a close-up of that windmill. And the next slide takes us back to China. Cold mountains and snowy peaks was done by Lan Ying, and he shows us this frigid atmosphere, this frigid landscape of mountains, of rivers, but a lot of snow. And his imitation of Fan Guan is pretty much with the vegetation at the top of the mountains. But the rest of the painting is his. We tend to think nowadays that copying somebody else's artwork is not very good. But I guess this was an attempt to provide some homage to the early painters. And it's quite prevalent to see copies of the masters. So in this, we take a journey. When you see a Chinese landscape, there's a lot going on. It's quite different from a Western landscape, because frequently it's difficult to figure out what's, figuring ground, perspective, and things like that. But let's start along the river on the right bank. You see a bridge, and there is on that bridge a little closer up towards our foreground, so near the bottom of the painting, that's the pavilion in back, which is a place where somebody might rest. Yes, the bridge up front, it's hard to see this, but there is a man on a horse or donkey, and just to the right of the bank, to the right of that tree, yes, right there. And behind him, it's hard to see also, but there is a porter who's carrying something on a long pole. So a lot of times landscape paintings in China will invite you to take a journey and start close up and then go past the bridge and then turn right. But as you are passing the bridge, as you're going along, you want to have some commune, you want to commune with nature. You'll be hearing sounds, you'll be seeing sights of nature. And one of the major religions or philosophies in China was Taoism. And that in that particular philosophy, people felt that objects, all objects, inanimate objects, mountains, stones, rivers, waters, have some energy. And to be able to tap into that was important. It's also important for artists to be able to try to represent something living, some kind of energy coming out of all the rocks, the stones, the trees, the leaves. And one of the things that I wanted to mention was that the docents went through this painting just on Monday, and we were asked, what is it you might hear related to water? Well, some things you might hear not related to water could be the birds, could be the wind, but you might hear the thunk of the snow as it's falling. You could hear the plodding of your horse's hooves as it goes through the snow. You might hear some ice falling. And so this is quite evocative of snow and water in many ways. And you hear the water from the rivers rippling. Our next slide takes us to back to Europe, Northern Europe. And this is a casket that's not terribly big. It's about 5 inches deep, about a foot wide. And it's made by one of the really great craftsmen, Danish craftsman, Gottfried Wolfram. And it's likely that he worked for King Christian of Denmark, who purchased, we know he purchased a casket made of amber with ivory inlays for his wife from Wolfram. And this might be the casket, we don't know. So amber, and you see lots of the amber, the orange, oval and rectangular and shapes, parallelogram type shapes on this casket. which is lined with velvet. And it also has ivory inlay. Those are the white rectangular pieces. But amber comes from the sea. Well, how is that? If we take a look at our next slide, we'll see a map of Europe. Now, east of the North Sea and east of Denmark, east of Sweden is the Baltic Sea. We see the Baltic countries of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and north of Germany, Poland, east of Denmark, is the Baltic Sea. Well, before the ice age of 40 million to 60 million years ago, this area was all pine forest. It's not an extant pine forest. The pines are no longer living. But when the ice age came, they were buried. And then when the ice melted, the Baltic Sea formed. And over the years, over the millennia, over the millions of years, the amber from the pine tree resin was created. And how do we get to amber? Well, amber has a specific gravity of between 1.06 and about 1.10. And water, the specific gravity of water, ocean water is about 1.02. So some of this would float, particularly with the currents. It wouldn't just stay, sunk in the deep. Now, whenever anybody found amber, pieces of amber coming ashore, the kings of these countries would proclaim that it belonged to them upon pain of death. So the kings amassed the silver, the amber, placed the amber with other wealthy objects, high quality objects, and would make things like this amber casket. The next few slides will show you other portions of the casket. So there it is from the top, and there's a landscape scene done in ivory. There's some side views, I think, of there it is open, and the interior has some velvet in it. And this is where you would put your, treasured objects. And I want to say that there's amber, ivory, wood, glass, brass, and velvet in here. And the last slide for the series shows you the ivory inset. So quite a remarkable piece. I'm doing this by date, so we're going back and forth. We're not going, one region at a time, because our next slide will take us to the samurai helmet. And this is quite a piece. I mean, it's very tall. It's about 26 inches tall, and it's got this clamshell on it. It's a ceremonial samurai helmet. It was done during the Edo period, which was a time when Japan was pretty much at peace. This kind of helmet might be worn to a gathering, a ceremonial gathering at Edo Castle, where there would be many samurai with many people wearing brightly decorated helmets. So let's see. If we can look at the next view, you'll see that the back sort of looks like a carp. There are allusions to fish, sort of like maybe scales, and that is meant to provide a sense of peace and quiet, because in some of the Japanese art that we have at the DIA, The intent is to try to show stillness and movement together. So the Japanese samurai cultivated something called bun and bu. Bun was knowledge and practice of the civilian arts, and we'll see that in just a little bit. And bu was the practice of the warrior traditions. And the necessity to remain calm in a turbulent time was foremost in some of this training. And indeed, one of the samurai, excuse me, and master swordsman wrote, the undisturbed mind is like the calm body of water reflecting the brilliance of the moon. Empty the mind and you will discover the undisturbed mind. So this is a piece for contemplation in many ways. Let's go to our next slide, which shows more cultivated arts of the samurai. Now, Noh Theater started to become important during the 1400s in Japan. And it was, there was a particular shogun who was a patron of Noh Theater. The samurai became patrons as well of the Noh Theater. And in Noh Theater, you have depictions of warriors, or sometimes you have depictions of ghosts and scary characters. You have movements, rapid movements, punctuated with slow movements. There is some singing involved, and all the actors were male. The samurai would frequently build their own theaters, Noh theaters, and we'll take a look at what that theater looks like in a little bit. But let's take a look at what this theater robe shows us. This would be worn over, the main characters would wear two robes, sort of to give them bulk, and they could then move in their very stately way. We see on this robe a lot of hexagons. The hexagons are turtles. Turtles are symbols of longevity. And they're also good luck. But do you see some things that look like wheels, wagon wheels? Yes, right there. And the wagon wheels are meant to evoke ox carts. Why ox carts? Well, ox carts were also a symbol of the well-to-do, because ox carts were used by highborn people, people from the courts, to for transportation. And the next slide will show you what an ox cart looks like. It's very fancy. The crests on top of the wagon are, and this is from the Cincinnati Art Museum. This is the only piece of art that's not from the DIA. And Helen Reinsberg from the Asian Art Club there sent this to me. So the crests on top are crests of the highborn families. You see on the sides of the wagon, there's some windows, but the bamboo slats could not be seen through because the ladies of the court were not allowed to be seen in public. So they might be able to look out through the slats, but you couldn't see in. So these were pretty precious objects. They're probably fairly expensive. And those are the wagon wheels that we see on the robe. So let's go back to the robe. So that's why wagon wheels are associated with the wealthy. I think my first impression was, gee, what's so unusual about a wagon wheel? So they were precious objects. What's the connection with water? During the winter, wagon wheels were stored in the water because that would prevent them from, or when they're not in use, that would prevent them from drying out and cracking. And so you see the wheels that look as if they're partially submerged, and they are. They're meant to be shown in water. The slide 2 down from this will show you what the Noh Theater looks like. And the Noh Theater actors would enter from the left, all the way from behind, and they would come up to the stage in front. And it was quite an expensive undertaking, I'm sure, at that time. Okay, our next slide shows us a volcano in Ecuador. This is Cotopaxi. If you come to the DIA through the main entrance on Woodward Avenue, and you're in the large lobby area and you look left, this is what you will see. It's a very large painting by, at that time, Frederick Edwin Church was the preeminent landscape painter. And he is known as one of the Hudson River painters, which is around the area of New York, upstate New York. So Cotopaxi is about a volcano, is the name of a volcano in Ecuador. The Hudson River painters started painting in the woods of the Adirondacks, but they started soon to journey elsewhere. So some people might have gone to the west. They might have gone to Yosemite Park. And in search of new places, Church went to Ecuador in 1953 and 1957. He took sketches. So this is a composite painting of some of the sketches he might have made. And he brought this out in 1862. Now, the Civil War started on April 12th, 1861, with the Battle of Fort Sumter in South Carolina, when Confederates, fired upon the fort, thus starting a 4-year war. And when people saw this, they saw the smoke coming from the volcano as a symbol of the Civil War. But Church paints the rising sun reflected in the water in the shape of a cross. And he was a very religious person. And one of the major things he wants to say is that, and I'm going to quote this from the DIA's website. In this cosmic drama of light dispelling the darkness, Church mirrors the contemporary tragedy of the Civil War and offers hope for its resolution through the cross formed by the sun's reflection on the lake. So this was a huge painting. So it would tour various cities. It would be rolled up, and then when it came to his city, it would be unfurled. And people would come and pay 25 cents or something to come and see it. Church studied Alexander von Humboldt, who spent 5 years in South America. And as a lot of you may know, he was the first person to realize that, unlike the Neptunists who felt that the Earth, everything that you see is due to a process of sedimentation, he came up with the theory that volcanic action is what created mountains. And then you have ice, you have snow falling in the top, and they come down and they form the rivers. And so Frederick Edwin Church was quite familiar with some of these theories. And we like to point out to the left, bottom left, to the left of this dark tree is a light figure right there. To the slight, there it is, and it's a girl with a llama. So if you take a look at the, frequently in a landscape painting, and as we saw just now with the landscape painting from China, frequently you'll see a figure of a human, just to give you, the enormity of size that we're looking at. And just like a Vanitas painting, there are signs of hope in this. The waterfall, and then on the right, towards the bottom, you see some birds flying. And so it's a magnificent piece. Please do come by and see it. Let's see, it's 3:21. I'll just do a couple more pieces. The next piece of art is Leisure Hours by John Millay. And he was English. And this shows a couple of very wealthy young girls, Anna and Marion Pender. Their father was very, very wealthy. They lived in a place right off of St. James Park. Sir John Pender guaranteed the funds for the government, or for the first permanent underwater cable between Ireland and Newfoundland. And he commissioned this painting, and this hung over their mantelpiece. And so what we're looking at here, at first glance, it's two wealthy young girls. They look a bit bored. They are in these fabulously expensive dresses of velvet, a lot of frills and plush surroundings. And they have a goldfish bowl in front of them. And we can't, what we come to is some feeling that, the girls are on display, just like the two fish in the goldfish bowl in front of them. And this was, of course, during the Victorian era, when women who went outside had to be accompanied. They really weren't seen in public. Men were supposed to be seen in public. They would have jobs. Women stayed home with their children and their families. So they lived a very cloistered kind of a life. And I think the artist really brings that out quite well in this piece. And would you like to do one last piece, or shall we stop for questions? Any particular thoughts? If we don't have a lot of
Freda,
Yes.
Go ahead with one more.
Okay, let's do the next one. So the next piece is called The Baptism. And if you look at, we have a couple of other pieces by Thomas Whitbridge, and they're all sort of they're beautiful landscapes. And we, the viewer, seem to be at some distance at what's going on. So it's almost like we're an interloper. We're coming upon a private scene. And what is that private scene? They're a group of people by the water's edge. We get some hints, however. If you look between the trees and go straight back, you'll see a slight bit of white pointing straight up. That's it. That's a church spire. So what we are led to believe by the title and also the church spire, that somebody is being baptized. And so here we see water as part of a religious ceremony that brings new members into a Christian religion, perhaps the Baptist religion. And I think, well, I'm going to put a little bit of interpretation here. So I think what the artist might want us to do is not just look, but in some ways be and not be aware of maybe not transformed is, maybe that's too strong a word, but somehow be affected by what we see. So let's leave it at that, and let's field other whatever questions there might be. I'm sorry there's not enough time, but there are many other works of art at the DIA that do refer to water, either as depicted or perhaps the absence of water, or refer to it in an allegorical way.
Well, Freda, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
This
I'm
was
delighted.
this was wonderful for me. It helps me maintain a very healthy perspective of water, not just water in engineering and water in public health, but these images and feelings that we get from water. There are a few questions that have come in that I'm going to follow up with you on.
Okay.
In fact, a couple people asked if you could say something about that cart, whether it was the cart that you were explaining when you were describing the water wheels. And the question was that full scale?
Oh, okay, good question. So if we go back to the cart, the cart is actually about 5 feet long from front to back, and the space was really pretty small. It was about I would say it's about a yard. No, it's more than that. I do have the dimensions someplace, and I don't quite have it here. So was this a full-scale cart? It is a full-scale cart, I believe, that the Cincinnati Art Museum has. But I'm not sure. Well, let's see, 5 feet long. I think it would have been full scale as to what they have. The wagon wheels here are, and I wanted to show this just as an example of what wagon wheels look like on an ox cart. And I also wanted to show you that ox carts aren't plain carts. They are very fancy carts. So thank you for that question.
I would not have known that. And I also appreciate your comments about the wagon wheels being stored in water. That was very interesting to me.
Great.
Another question, several people had this. What is your favorite piece out of all those you've covered today? Could you pick one or two that you just love to look at and think about?
That is a great question. You know, I've always loved Cotopaxi. Before I became a docent, I would come and look at it, and I really wouldn't understand it. I just thought it was dramatic, and it was just, you know, it moves you to look more closely. It stirs up feelings of danger, perhaps. So, but also maybe some amount of quiet or peacefulness, but just the beauty of the scenery I've always loved it. So thank you.
I can tell you as a hydraulic engineer, the first thing that my eyes go to in that, honestly, is the overfall into the waterfall, the reservoir.
Really?
It up, and then how it comes in. Very cool and very, very realistic. So I think, you know, how were you able to, another question, how were you able to curate all these pieces? I guess one question is, did the DIA assist in putting together this in terms of selecting which pieces you would be talking about?
Oh, that's a good question. No, and that's why I alluded to my friend and colleague, Mina Schwartz. And I'm so glad, Carol, that you asked me to give a talk, because originally I was just going to give you one of our canned talks. Now we have a number of BTS talks that are about the greatest works of art or things like that. But when you said, can I talk about water? I mean, you know, that got me thinking. what kind of works might there be? Minna helped a lot with, the selection of pieces here. And she had a lot of background information. Now, on pieces like Cotopaxi and many of the other pieces, we have study guides for the docents. And they might be a page worth of facts and figures. Many of the works don't have that, but they might have an article in the DIA bulletin. So I looked up a lot of the articles that were associated with the pieces. And then the handy dandy Encyclopedia Britannica, and I still have a paper copy of it, provides a lot of other information. We're not allowed to talk about information that we might see on Wikipedia. Now, so I must make one disclaimer. I did use Wikipedia for one of the maps of the Fertile Crescent because I thought it was a good source to depict the shape of the Fertile Crescent, and it also really showed it. But the lands within the Fertile Crescent have been well documented. So I think that map really wasn't far off, if it was at all. So we use a number of sources. The librarian at the DIA sent me some articles as well. So the other pictures of pieces that are not at the DIA, the kildas and the clay jars, for example, come from the article that the librarian sent me. So I felt comfortable in using that. So this was pretty much, put together based upon a number of different sources. It was fun, quite frankly. Love doing it.
Well, thank you so much. It was fun for us. And I can imagine this is something that if you continued to be interested, we could, some of us here at Wayne State could work together to even continue this sort of traveling exhibit. And
Sure,
that would be
be
something
great. I would be happy to do this, yes. And when the museum opens up again for tours, I'd love to take you on a tour of the art objects that were here or any other place you'd like. I do, so, the docents are always happy to provide tours. So not just myself, but others are quite available. By the way, if I could ask Jamie to just scroll down to the end of this talk, I wanted to say that there are, I'm sorry, there are a number of pieces I didn't get to talk about, but there are some exhibits that are taking place at the DIA that I should mention, and the next slide shows it. A couple of things going on now. We've got car design. We also have in our photographic studio, behind the Ancient Middle East Gallery, we have Russ Marshall's photographs of Detroit. There are a lot of free events going on with Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. The next slide shows you a couple of things that are coming up that we invite you to come to. Artemisia Gentileschi and Van Gogh in America. So this will be next year. So plan on coming.
That's great, Freda. And we fully expect that sometime soon, your exhibit is going to be up here also as a worldwide water and the DIA. Thank you, Freda, so very much. And I want to thank Jamie and Delishan and others who have helped put this together. We will continue with Water at Wayne in the fall and probably go back to a few technical topics, but hopefully we can bring some artistic and humanistic topics in the fall also. So again, thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And Freda, that was so fun. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. I had great fun. Thank you, Jamie and Delishan also. So, okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And great to see you. Great
Thanks,
to see you.
Freda.